It is good to be back with you. Welcome to the What's Next Living Longer, Better, Smarter podcast. In this edition, finding your passion at any age. This episode is made possible by Vivid Picks and by Get Set Up. Learn something new every day and live your best life. We'll get started right after this.
So I've been in the photo business for 37 years, and I've seen a lot of things come, go. But one thing has not changed, and that this wonderful thing we call a photograph captures a moment in time so that we're able to reminisce and relive those memories tomorrow. And it's important for us to do that so we can share them with loved ones and we can share them with future generations. So please don't let your memories fade. They're important.
Our topic, finding your passion at any age. I'm Fred Fishkin along with Mary Furlong. Hi, Mary.
Hi, Fred. I'm real excited about today's session.
Really, I suspect that art can play a pretty big role in helping us to live longer, better, and smarter. And with us are Susan Abbott Martin. Hi, Susan.
Hey, Fred. Hey, Mary.
Also joining us is John Wider. Hi, John.
Hey, Fred. Hi, Mary. Hi, Susan.
Hi, John.
And Leslie Lynn Lamb. Hi, Leslie.
Hey, everyone.
Hey, Leslie.
And Leslie, you've been with us before as a graphic designer and a winner of the Get Set Up Accelerator program. So great to see you with us, and congratulations on all your amazing work.
Yes, thank you, Mary.
Well, the first artist we are going to turn to is John Wider from Edgewater, Maryland. But John, I think you are a New Jersey native like me?
That I am, Fred. Yeah, I've the good old Garden State there for about 40 years or so before corporate transfers took me away. Most of the family's still there.
You've lost your accent, you know?
Takes some work. Northern New Jersey, tri-state area.
And John, you and I met at the National Press Club during one of our conferences when you were the CEO of ARP Services, and you did a phenomenal job at ARP in growing that business. But I found myself becoming a fan of your artwork in your Encore career. So tell us how you went from 601 East Street, I guess, in Washington, to doing this amazing work with watercolor paintings.
Well, thank you for the compliment. I've been a business guy, quote unquote, all my life. At one point, it was a Christmas gift from my wife where she bought me some watercolor paint supplies. And I looked at her, you know, how some people are good gift receivers. I guess maybe I'm not so good at it. I looked at her and I said, what am I supposed to do with these? I'm a person who can't even draw a good stick person. And so she laughed. She said, well, maybe go take a class at Maryland Hall. And so I did follow up and do that. It was for beginners. And as you might imagine, I realized just how challenging it was. But there were things that surprised me. The way watercolor behaves on paper is really has some surprises in it. And there are happy accidents and pleasant surprises. So it was intriguing to me. Although that one class, I'd say nothing survived in terms of anything that I'd shown anyone. But then some years later, when I was approaching retirement at ARP Services, that's when I started thinking, well, you know, you go at ARP, you're attending so many of these workshops and seminars and so forth. And so this focus on retirement and living your best life became something that was constantly on my mind. And so I started to go and take classes again at Maryland Hall. And it progressed rather nicely, to say the least. And I continued doing that, in spite of the fact I found it very challenging. I guess the thing that overrode it all was it was just incredibly interesting. When you're a person who's done something, as I did with business, for as long as I did, you become sort of an expert. You can do it in your sleep. And so here, all of a sudden, I was finding that I was seeing everything really quite differently. It's almost as though I had a different pair of eyes, and certainly was thinking through the other side of my brain. And so it was rejuvenating. It was a rebirth in a lot of ways. And so I couldn't wait to get back and do it. And so I took classes for a continued period of time, and up until the pandemic, I entered a few shows and so forth. And then when the pandemic hit, 6 classmates of mine and we formed a salon just ourselves. And so every Monday we get together for about 2 hours, and we show what we've done during the week, because we keep working at it, because it's a process. And the more you work at it, the more you get closer to discovering improving your skill set, and ultimately maybe getting towards having some talent. So it's been fun. That's, I guess, the best way to describe it.
John, what are some of the favorite things that you like to paint? You've said the pleasure is in the journey and the continued growth. And while we're at it, we're going to take a look at some of your work.
Yes, this is a painting of Peggy's Cove in Nova Scotia. And it's somewhat indicative of not only what I like to paint, but essentially how I get at it. I have a style that for watercolor is somewhat unique. It's more realistic. A lot of watercolors are soft and have a translucency to them. Mine are, as you can see here, a little stronger. And I work from photographs. They're typically places that we've been. It could be, in the United States, Europe, Cuba, so on and so forth. I have friends who pass on photographs they'd like me to paint on a commission basis. This was one of those. There's a saying that somebody gave me about painting from photographs, because a lot of watercolor painters paint plein air. I do not. And that is that photographs are capture perfection, whereas paintings honor the image, if you will.
And we have another image to take a look at. This is, I don't know if that's a sunrise or a sunset, but it's beautiful.
It is. That is a sunrise, and it's I believe that is the Outer Banks, and I think it's just called Morning Sunrise. This was a commission as well. Friends were up at Martha's Vineyard, and it was a bit of a challenge in that the photograph they took was really pretty inadequate. It was very dark, but they loved the things that they loved to see in this, and what they sent to me and asked me to do was the chair, the Adirondack chair, and then the sky lit up as in the sunrise. And so I had another friend who's a photographer actually run it through several filters so that I could actually see, because everything else in between those two things was almost pitch black, to bring out what was there that I couldn't see. And it was fun in the sense that it left it to my imagination as to how I wanted to depict it. And so in this one, I thought the thing that was rather interesting was the casting of the colors of the sunset into the foreground, if you will.
Just beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, so I like to do portraits. Quite often I get them as commissions. This of course is called Climbing the Hill. Amanda Gorman, and her delivering her I thought wonderful poem during the inauguration.
All right. So inspiring. I love the work, and I can't wait to see it up close in person. So now it's great pleasure to introduce Susan. And Susan and I were college roommates. We reconnected on our 50th reunion this 2 years ago. And I always loved Susan's style and talent. And she went on to a great career at a university. And she's going to tell us a little bit about her story from being a professor, and then her work and how her work has been rediscovered.
Well, I'm going to start with, I didn't know I was going to do this. I'm going to start way back 50 years ago at Holy Names College. I was a very lousy student, but I majored in art and philosophy. And my parents asked me what I would like for graduation. And I said a loom, because I had been doing weaving at Holy Names. And basically that gift sent me on my journey as an artist. I married young, went up to Davis, and with this loom, created a community, or found my way into a community of weavers. And then that I got bored, I think, or something. And I decided to go back to graduate school, but I really couldn't do that because my grades weren't stellar and I was still married. And anyway, long story short, I got into the California College of Arts and Crafts and studied there. And that really is the beginning of the journey. But I had to make a living. So, I have maintained a studio practice for the 40 years that, between the loom and now 50 years, I guess. But there was something in retirement, the quality of the time, that really changed the work. And ironically, when I moved into sculpture during graduate school, I sold my loom. And 2 years ago, I bought another one, and I've reintroduced weaving into my studio practice. I won't be showing that work today, but retirement and time really has facilitated an arc in my creative process, probably in my life and my work as a reflection of that. But my work would be very different if I wasn't retired. I really believe that.
Susan, tell us, when we had our reunion, we all went to the beach, and Susan showed us some pictures of when you studied in Monet's garden. And we were all so excited that you had that experience.
Well, there are what's called artist residencies, and the visual artists, choreographers, writers, any creative activity. So most of these residencies welcome an interdisciplinary guest. But I went to, this was an amazing opportunity. I went to Monet's garden for 3 months. I lived and worked there, and there was a little farm that the foundation had bought across the road from the garden. And we lived there and worked there, and we had 24-hour access to the garden, which was, it still resonates with me in an amazing way.
Oh, Susan, let's show our viewing audience some of your wonderful work.
So when you apply to a residency, they ask that you make a proposal about what you're going to do. And so I got there and I started doing what I had proposed to do. And then it just wasn't quite right. And, there's a kind of panic, what am I going to do? And the garden was closed to the public every Monday. So the gardeners could prune and, take care of what needed to be taken care of. And late Monday, there would be this pile of debris that they had created in pruning and taking care of things. And I looked at that and I thought, I'm going to try to make a sculpture a day, and to see if I can make one that the gardeners wouldn't recognize what it was, which is ridiculous, of course, because they knew every inch of the garden. But this is, so what I did, they're small, probably the biggest is 5 inches tall, 3 inches wide. I made a sculpture a day from the materials that the gardeners left and thread. And I could use thread, and I could use a staple gun, stapler, to hold anything together. So this is a rock that's, I'm going to guess, I'm not really good at identifying plant material, but I think those are the leaves of an iris. Also, I was raised spent some time in Japan. My father was in the Air Force. And I think in this work, you see a sort of Japanese influence, sort of unintentional, but it happened anyway. The other thing I did while I was there is I had a Polaroid camera and took a photograph of the garden, anything in the garden. In this case, it's poppies, and just covered the Polaroid with a material called oil stick. It's oil paint in a stick form, sort of like it's a very soft crayon. So I covered it with white oil stick and then scratched back in it with the idea that it would become a sort of an homage to Monet, this impressionistic surface. And I had hoped to do one of those a day, but I didn't get that done. So the other thing I learned in retirement is that I've always considered myself a sculptor, and that I made sculpture. But what I realized with the opportunity to really do more work is that my work is very project based. So it's and often dependent on what I see more than what I think. But this piece is from a body of work called Handmaid's Week. And I collected, for another body of work I collected embroideries that were either friends were discarding, it could have been their mother, their grandmother's embroideries. And I also went to flea markets and bought embroideries. And then I stretched them on stretcher bars. So they became like paintings. And, by sort of disrupting the utilitarian aspect of the tea towel, the dresser scarf, I think this happens. People look at them differently when they're on a wall and there's 40 of them. So I found at the Alameda flea market 7 tea towels with the days of the week embroidered on them. And I'm going to try to remember this, but Sunday was leisure. Monday was washing. Tuesday was ironing. Wednesday was cleaning. Thursday was gardening. Friday was shopping, and Saturday was cooking. So I was just really seduced by this idea that in the 50s, especially my mother, who had been a nurse in World War II, was sort of, cast back into the home. And she never did this days of the week thing very well. I certainly didn't do it very well. But so I made, so each day has a stretched tea towel, a collage made with vintage magazines from the 50s and 60s and 70s, and a sculpture. So this is Sunday sculpture. Picnic basket, dominoes, and, So now we're back to, this is just to clarify about the project based, and why again, in retirement, I've learned, I'm not material specific. I'm really not even idea specific. It's a combination of an idea and materials that I see that facilitate a body of work. So this is another one of the sculptures that I made in Monet's garden. And you can see the staples there where I sort of created the folding the leaf over and stapling it created the pocket for the stone.
And Susan, recently your work was picked up by a marketing group and it's on display at the Four Seasons in Scottsdale. Is that correct?
Yeah, this was very, this is how exciting life is. In 1995, I made a work. I called it Giverny Revisited. It was for a show at the Dallas Contemporary, which again, that stuff seldom happened to me, but it did. And it turns out that there was a woman on the board at the Dallas Contemporary whose husband was a CEO at Formica. So the big group of artists were selected to be in the show, and Formica sent each artist a box of every sample of product that Formica made, and we could pick anything and how much we wanted it to make a work for this exhibition. So at the time, my work was made of I was using a lot of wood and a lot of metal. And so I asked them to send me 12-inch squares. I work in squares. That's a pretty consistent format for me. And I asked them to send me 12-inch squares of every metal and, faux metal and faux wood product that they made. And I made a work with that. That piece that was made in 1995, somebody at a art consulting business in Atlanta, I got an email about, a year ago, almost right to the date. And it said, we have a client who likes this piece. And it was a photograph of the work that I did in 1995. Can you make something like it? That's what, out of the blue. And 40 years ago, when you start out, you think those things are going to happen all the time, or especially if you're making this huge effort to get the work out, you think, out of 50 letters, maybe I'll get at least. Never did that happen to me. Never. So here it is. And a friend of mine was staying here at the time, and she does big glass commissions, and very knowledgeable. And I said to her, I read her this email. I said, "Is this a scam? Does this make any sense to you?" And she goes, and she recognized it right away as a real thing. So anyway, that was October. And in January of 2022, we installed the work at this Four Seasons in Scottsdale. And it really changed. It has changed. And then I've since done a second one for them. And what I really like about this, it's sort of, and again, I think came about because of retirement. It changed a focus of my work. I always will continue. I am doing, a body of work that's very personal to me, but this opportunity to work on, really collaborate with a team of people, to make a work that's going to sit in a public place for as long as they want it to be there, is really different than making work that you might show in a gallery for a month. So I'm finding that my practice, actually, just saying this to you out loud, is bifurcated. There's the private work that I do, that's basically mine. I wouldn't be adverse to showing it, but this public work is really important to me because it keeps me engaged in different ways with different people, the art consultant, the fabricator, et cetera, et cetera.
So Susan and John, I'm curious whether you are doing this as a second career, Encore career, or as a labor of love. And there's a wonderful book called Mastery, which George Leonard wrote, and talks about kind of this third age of life and, how it's a time of mastery. So maybe we'll start with Susan, and then we'll go to John, and then time for Leslie. So
that's really interesting, because if right now I would say I hope that the ability to do commissions would become a second career. I would never have framed it in that way, but I think my ambition for that part of my studio practice, I think it would be great if it turned into a second career. My private practice, what I'm calling my private practice, that's just a labor of love, really, and I really psychologically need to do it. Keeping my hands, what's that saying about idle hands? It's very meditative. The work is very meditative, quiet, and I have to do it. But I love this idea of the commission thing becoming a second career, Mary.
And I think all of the Holy Names girls, we're all 74 now. We were so excited that this happened to you. And then you and I could connect because I love entrepreneurs. So John, how about you? Do you see this as a labor of love, or do you see it as an Encore career?
So for me, it definitely is. It's a blend of what Susan said. I'd say primarily it's a labor of love. Retirement does give you the gift of time, and with this, I set up I've got a studio down in the basement, and I go down there and I leave, everything's left out. I don't have to put anything away. For anyone who does this or thinks about doing it, don't set up and put things away. You have to you'll walk by it 5, 6, 7 times a day. You'll go down there at night before you go to bed and you see something and you get right back at it for 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And it's just wonderful. So, I mean, but I do sell the stuff, and the business side of me kind of gets in there a little bit, okay, now what am I going to do with all these paintings? And so I set up a website. Okay, now, I used to have people that did websites. Now I'm going to do this. So I've got a website, which was a lot of learning. And then how do you promote it? Okay, I got on Instagram, and then you tie Instagram into Facebook. And then now it starts to get closer to a job. And so I push back on that. I definitely don't want this to be a job. So that's why the career thing says, no, I hope somebody's going to listen to this who's really skilled at marketing and promotion and social media and would like to partner with me, because I would love to turn that aspect over to somebody and let them run with it. Because there are so many ways that people utilize something that they've created, on gifts that turn into, cups and place settings and shirts and a whole host of things beyond prints and that kind of thing. But all of that takes time, and all of that creates a job. And I like the going at it and painting, and when I paint, they're mostly places I've been or people that I know. And if I don't know, and I'm doing a portrait, I find sources and or talk to people who know them. And when you do that, you're like, it's a very intimate activity. Mm-hmm. You put yourself in. I talk to the painting. I talk to. I've got music going on, but I talk to the painting. I'm looking for the image of the person, the spirit of the person that I'm painting, to come forward somehow and present itself. And there are so many revisions that you make until you get just that look in the eye, the little something extra, the shadow that brings in a ruggedness, if it's a waterman or something along those lines that you're looking for. And that to me is, the love of it all. I mean, and with that, I've learned more about technology and social media, and it's brought me into different social networks of people that do enjoy my paintings, and they offer to comment. They send painting ideas to me, and you stay connected. It's been a blast.
But he loves the creating, I can tell. So.
You bet.
And Leslie, let's talk about your background and journey into graphic design.
Yes. So thank you, Fred. Like John, I have a background in business. And so I have had great difficulty in thinking of myself as an artist. I am not a traditional artist. And I do have a funny story to share. I have always loved advertising art. I think Susan was talking a bit about the vintage art. I have always loved that. And my mother used to tell tales that when I was a little girl and the TV was on, I wouldn't watch the shows, but I always watched the commercials. And then when we would go out, people thought I could read at a very young age, but it was just that I had watched enough commercials that
Great.
I could repeat what was on the page. So I guess that's really where my love of art came in at an early age, although I didn't know it. And also, of course, with accounting, you're painting pictures. It's just that most people don't appreciate or understand them. And so to think of myself as an artist is still something I'm going through. But I do create on one primary platform, which is canva.com, which is a free design platform for non-designers. So it helped me greatly to learn what my art was going to be. So I am in awe of people like John and Susan that can create what I call true art. But what I create is I paint with pixels to create conversations. So my business was started during COVID, and it came out of me leading a conversational group. And this is one of the pieces I did for the conversational group for cooking. And my goal has always been to help people be able to take away a bit of what we've talked about. And so this was for National Hot Tea Month. And we were talking about tea tasting. And so they got to take away an image and some of the important points from our discussion, as well as a tea tasting journal where they could then share with their friends and do their own in-home tea tasting because many people were still locked down. So the impetus behind my art is the conversation. It's all about creating conversations. And so one of the things that I've transitioned into is working with senior centers and senior housing. So one of my current projects is to do table tent trivia, is what we're calling it, because it's very easy for them to print out. It's like a threefold brochure, and then they just make a little tent with it to put on the dining tables. And it just has little trivia points to create that conversation. And you can put a little vase down into it with maybe some little party pics in it, with little fun things like photo booth, disguises and stuff, just anything to get that conversation going. So that's what my art is. And that's where it came about, was through doing my volunteering with Get Set Up. And I love it.
And of course, Get Set Up was born during the COVID times. In some states like Hawaii, many people were out of jobs in tourism and the service sector, and they skilled up with Get Set Up tools. And Get Set Up was on a very fast clip to grow. But you found a whole new community inside Get Set Up, right?
Yes, I did. And that community was and is my lifeline today. In fact, I am collaborating with some of my fellow winners of the Business Accelerator program because by creating conversations and doing it around trivia, I have to do a lot of research on the topic. And one of my fellow creators also does food. She does whole food, plant-based. And so I do some research and share it with her, and then it just saves her time, which is really kind of what I'm all about too, is helping the senior centers, the senior housing, the activity directors save time so that they can focus on their residents and their attendees and not have to create, the funny stuff that I do. So
Get Set Up's been doing some really terrific things. So really for each of you, what are your thoughts about the idea of taking up creating, painting, sculpture, maybe another form of art, and what it has meant to your lives, each of your lives, and perhaps what it can mean for others? I'll turn to you first, John.
Well, it has been just a blessing, in a word. It's led to increased socialization, as I mentioned earlier. It's led me into areas of understanding technology. in a real world way, meaning touching it and making changes and that kind of thing. And it, as I mentioned at the very outset, I see life quite differently, and it's just been fabulous, rejuvenating.
Susan?
I would agree with what John's saying. I can't imagine not doing it for one. And again, this is the personal part of it. And then there's the business side of it, which I've never been very good at, but has really facilitated an engagement with the world, which is, if I didn't do that, I would be a hermit, basically. So there's the dialectic between the private and the public. I'm going to share a story, though, that just came to mind when John was talking. When I was working at the Art Institute, a teacher came in, a huge guy, and really talented, but he loved working with first-year students. But could be a bear. He could be a little judgmental of, how come they don't know how to do this? And they should know how to do that kind of stuff. And he came into my office after the summer break, and he said, I've been taking guitar lessons, over the summer. And he goes, I forgot what it was like to learn how to do something you didn't know. And he said, this experience of learning something I didn't know is going to profoundly change my teaching practice in relationship to these 18-year-olds. And I think learning something, the thing about being an artist, you're always learning, in my opinion, in my experience. There's if you master one aspect of your practice, there's this real urge to learn more or do more, or it's a curiosity that might be the word, but that's the value of it in my life.
Just beautiful. Leslie?
Well, my art is so entwined with my experience with Get Set Up. I would never have done this without being a part of Get Set Up. So I am eternally grateful to them. But it has allowed me to express my creativity while helping other people, which is what I want to do. And also, one of the biggest benefits I learned from Get Set Up was what I call pivot and pursue, as opposed to meander and make do, I think, which was what I was doing like when I first started with Get Set Up. I was really looking for purpose in my life. And just like everyone else has spoken about, I have gone down roads that did not lead where I thought they would go. And I could allow myself to be crushed by that, but instead I've learned to pivot and pursue. And pursuing something is a very passionate thing, as is art. So I am, again, thankful for everyone that I have met along my journey, everyone I will meet, because accountants are not times, there's just not a lot of passion there, right? We're numbers people. And so like Susan was talking, I have discovered a different side of myself, which has made me a more fully rounded person, which again is just more dimensions, just like there is in art.
What a wonderful discussion. Thank you all for sharing your journey with us. A lot of times we think, who am I if I'm not this person in a job? And I think this session really illuminated the many different ways you can go and pursue your creative talents, and also the new communities that form around those talents. And so it's been very exciting. We really appreciate you all being with us this morning. Fred?
Journeys from the corporate offices to academic hallways and classrooms to art. Let's find out where our viewers can turn to for more information about your work. John, where can people go?
So I've got a website, as I mentioned, www.watercolorbyjjw.com. On Instagram, just hashtag watercolorbyjjw, and on Facebook by the same.
Terrific. Susan?
The website is susanabbotmartin.com. It just launched a couple of days ago. I just finally got that done. And on Instagram, Susan Abbott Martin.
What great timing for us. Leslie?
And I am at graceplacecreative.com. And unlike John or Susan, I am not anywhere else. So it's the website or nothing, but there is a contact form on there.
Oh, terrific. Thank you all once again for being so generous with your time. And we're so envious of your work. Mary, I like to think there's a little artist, at least in all of us.
Well, yes. I mean, I think whether it's gardening or cooking or design, that's what kind of gets me excited. Of course, my father had a pig company. He was an entrepreneur. So we were always in the process of creating something. And I think creativity is a really important element as part of your third age.
Oh, I just came back from a trip to Vermont. I've got a long time love of photography. I'm going to show a couple of pictures here. Not that I can compete, but so this was up at Lake Champlain, just a beautiful setting, a place called Grand Isle State Park in Vermont. The hard part here is first technically knowing how to use a camera, I suppose, and then getting up at early in the morning when it's so cold and enjoying the scenery there. And of course, when you're up there, you've got to take a picture of the leaves and such. So it was just a beautiful setting. And that's my contribution to the art world, which isn't nearly as wonderful as what all of you are creating, I don't think.
Beautiful.
John, I see a new commission piece out of that church with those. This has been great fun. So thank you all for being with us.
Thank you so
Thank you for
much.
having us.
Thank you.
We want to thank our sponsors once again, Vivid Pics, Don't Let Your Memories Fade, and Get Set Up. Join over 4 million older adults learning something new every day and live your best life. Thank you for tuning in, and remember you can find all of our episodes, including Longevity Deal Talk, at maryfurlong.com/podcasts.